A warm welcome to everybody who is here today with me live, online, and for those that may watch this after the fact. Today we're going to continue our discussion about the halakah of Mar Yeshua. Halakah means a walk or a way. It's a set of teachings from a rabbi or a Jewish master, a rav, to his or her disciples. Last week we talked about the outer halakah of compassionate works or selfless service. And we talked about how that was the true worship of God and how we truly really aren't worthy to stand here at this altar unless we're doing that in some small way throughout the week. Today we're going to continue talking about Mar Yeshua's halakah. We're going to go into his inner halakah, which is for purifying the mind and the heart of the disciples. Let's take a look at that. Inner halakah of Mar Yeshua. Inner halakah. Again, halakah means a walk or a way. Mar Yeshua's inner halakah was for purifying the disciples' mind and heart. The inner halakah was to prepare the soul for deeper, more secret halakah. Outer, inner, and secret halakah were given to disciples to prepare them for spiritual rebirth into the Bar Enash, or new humanity, the second Adam. There are really two aspects that are essentially one, but for studying we have to break it down into two items. Discriminating between good and evil, or right and wrong, and then purifying our actions, purifying our thoughts, our words, and our deeds, so that our outer world reflects our inner world. If we're doing wonderful outer actions of compassion, but yet our inner world is a mess, then that is hypocrisy. Also, it's the same thing for the inner halakah, that if we are showing ourselves as spiritual on the outside, but on the inside we're filled with negativity and hate or divisiveness, then that is also hypocrisy. So let's look at the beginning of this inner halakah and what that might mean. It's very basic and easy to understand. However, it's very complicated to do in daily practice. And that's what this is. It's not just showing up to church on Sunday, but it's making every day of our lives a worship of the Supreme Being, of the Abba, the Father, Mother, God of all. So discriminating between good and evil. The image of God within us is goodness, our divine essence. However, two impulses or inclinations were placed in the human heart at our creation or at our birth. There's the Yetzer HaTov, the good or selfless inclination, and there's the Yetzer Hara, the evil or selfish inclination. In Genesis, we see the word Yetzer, and it's spelled with two yods, two Y's. And this is Kabbalistically interpreted as being the two Yetzers, the two inclinations. The Yetzers are thought to reside within the human heart. So, when we are sometimes good, and we are sometimes not so good, we are se'ef. Se'ef means divided. And this is what most of humanity is. Most people are not saints, and most people are not totally bad either. Most of us are a mixture of both. And the goal of the inner halakah is to have a predominating Yetzer HaTov in our hearts. Good inclination, divine inclination, selfless inclination. We want to bring the Yetzer Hara down to the bare minimum, to where it's a whisper in the back of our minds that we can easily overcome. Some people think that the Yetzer Hara can never totally be eradicated. I don't know about that. I think that a lot of people are negligent to strive for such a high goal of totally eradicating evil thought, word, and deed from our minds. We'll say, oh, I'm only human. But yet Mar Yeshua says, don't ye know that ye are gods? Human potential is so far beyond what we can imagine. Yeshua also says, be perfect, be Tom, as your Father in heaven is Tom, perfect. So Jesus is aspiring us to a very high level. And if we're going for anything less, we're not aiming for his teachings and the goals he has for us. So for as long as we're sometimes behaving well, Yetzer HaTov, and sometimes acting selfishly, Yetzer Hara, for as long as we're acting from both the good and the bad inclinations, we are se'ef, divided. In the Christian Testament, this is called being double-souled, being double-minded. So the goal of the inner halakah, as well as the outer halakah and the secret halakah, but it's most clearly understood to most people through the inner halakah, is that we make the two one. What does it mean, make the two one? It means make the two Yetzers one Yetzer. In other words, we are being asked to eliminate in total the Yetzer Hara, the selfish inclination, or the evil inclination of the heart. There are different ways that we can eliminate that, and one is by constantly seeking to serve others. Last week we talked about the outer halakah of compassionate works. When you're focusing on uplifting others, you're not focusing on yourself. So most spiritual masters will teach us to serve the vulnerable, to serve the poor, the elderly, the sick, to protect children, etc. Because whenever we focus on helping others, we're not so focused on ourselves, our needs, the me, mine, and I of life. Another thing that Jesus highly criticized of the Pharisees was that they were hypocrites. O thou hypocrite. We'll see a verse about Jesus purportedly calling the Pharisees hypocrites. However, in the Hebrew language and the Aramaic language, there is no word for hypocrite. A hypocrite is an actor. It's a Greek-based word. And the Hebrew and Aramaic culture of the time had no theater. They had no acting. They had no stage acting. So Jesus could not have possibly said the word hypocrite. The great biblical scholar Louis Kaiser rolled back the Greek to the possible Aramaic, which would have been nasa be'af. Nasa be'af means to look down your nose at somebody. So what Jesus really criticized the Pharisees, and anybody that did it today, would be looking down at our nose at other people. And many Christians today do this. Many spiritual people of all religions do this. I'm saved, and you're not. I'm going to heaven, you're going to hell. That is looking down your nose at somebody else, thinking you're better than somebody else because of your education, your religion, your beliefs, whatever else. And Jesus wanted to completely eradicate that from the Jews of his time. So he criticized the Pharisees for looking down their nose at the common people, the Amaha Aretz, the people of the land. And it's very different to look down your nose at somebody or to be snobby with somebody than to act. A hypocrite is somebody who pretends to be something they're not. But if Jesus was really criticizing the Pharisees for being nasabeaf, that meant they weren't acting. They thought they were better than everybody else. They were more pure. They were more spiritual. They were more religious. And we see a lot of spiritual people doing this consciously or unconsciously. And if we are to truly purify our heart, we must eradicate any kind of notion of us looking down our nose at anybody. Everybody is equal, no matter their education, their way of life, their lifestyle, their religion. Everybody is equal, and we should work on seeing everybody as a temple of God, as God himself, and then act appropriately. But any time that we look down our nose at somebody, we are acting from the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. So any sense of being above others must be eradicated from our consciousness. Acting with guile. Jesus criticized many people of acting with guile. And he said, "Oh, behold, Nathanael, is there really a man from Israel with no guile?" Jesus was saying this hyperbolically. To have guile means to have deceit, to be two-faced, to be double-souled or double-minded. A goal of Mar Yeshua's inner halakah, or inner alchemy of the mind and heart, was to make the spiritual heart, lebab, a temple of God, and to become single, shalem, and tam. Single, whole, and perfect. Discriminating between good and evil. On the right-hand side, you see James's famous verse, James chapter 1, verse 8. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. From Luke chapter 6, verse 41, we see, "And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but perceivest not the beam that is in your own eye?" So here Jesus is criticizing what most of us do if we're not really witnessing our thoughts and our words and our deeds. We often will see other people speaking things that are offensive to us or doing things that we don't think is right, and we criticize them mentally or vocally, or we gossip about people. Jesus here is saying, why are you looking at other people's faults when you yourself have many that have not been cleaned up yet? Clean up your own act before you try to advise or help others to clean up theirs. So, in my mind, this verse goes two different directions. Mar Yeshua is speaking of people that gossip about others or just judge others. People have a very easy tongue to criticize others, but yet they can see no fault in their own words, thoughts, and deeds. So first, perfect yourself, and then try to give advice to somebody else. Never give advice to anybody unless they specifically ask you to. Never give advice without permission. It is aggression against other souls that may not be ready to hear the truth, or you may not be mature enough to give advice. I don't consider myself mature enough to give advice. But until we are perfect, we have no right trying to judge others or make others perfect. We could just share and fellowship with each other and be there for each other. By their fruits ye shall know them. Matthew chapter 7, verse 20. All you have to do is look at a person's life. Look at their house. My spiritual master always said, if somebody's house is messy, so is their mind. Outer mirrors inner. Inner mirrors outer. So first we have to begin with the most gross outward aspects of our life. Godliness, cleanliness is next to godliness. It's true. Whenever you focus on cleaning the outer world and your body, that's important. But we can't stop there. You have to keep on going inside, deeper. and purify every thought, word, and deed. The moment a negative emotion, a negative thought, a negative memory comes into our mind, we should pause and stop, not react, and reverse that emotion to its opposite, polar, positive attribute. Meaning, if I'm experiencing jealousy, then I should immediately give something away. Do likewise with any other negative emotion. By their fruits ye shall know them. Some people pretend to be very spiritual, and then you see that they're always angry, right? They're always criticizing others. They're not generous. They don't help anybody. They don't do selfless service. All they do is meditate, pray for themselves, and sit at home and relax. If somebody is really spiritual, they'll be going out of their way to serve others. They'll be praying with others, for humanity. Their meditations will some way include the peace and happiness of all beings everywhere. We have to change every selfish inclination to a selfless inclination. We have to move from I consciousness, all about me consciousness, to we consciousness, humanity consciousness. That is the goal of the inner halakah of Mar Yeshua. Purifying the spiritual heart. There's something called the single eye of the heart. You'll hear it in the Liturgy of the Chalice. After we're done with this talk, we'll be doing the Eucharist together. So, single eye of the heart, what does that mean? It means to always see and interact with the world to the Yetzer HaTov, the good inclination. Again, make the two one. Make the two Yetzers one good Yetzer, one good inclination, by eradicating the Yetzer Hara completely, or as much as we can. And by doing this, we purify our soul. We purify the neshama. There's the basar, which is our flesh, our physical body. The nefesh, which is our personality and kind of like our astral body. And then there's the neshama, which is the first level of soul. There are different levels of soul spoken of in pre-Kabbalistic thought. But it is thought that the nefesh, the personality, which includes the mind and the emotions, the personality of a human, if the mind and the emotions are negative and dark, then it can defile the neshama, the lower aspect of soul. It causes spiritual forgetfulness of God, forgetfulness of why we're really here. In order to purify the neshama, to remove the clouds from the sun of the soul, then we have to focus on making every thought, word, and deed a worship of God and of benefit to humanity. Only then will we become shalem, whole. Only then will we become tam, perfect. One cannot become one with the Bar Enash or with God without first purifying the heart. Purifying the spiritual heart. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and said of him, "Behold, a true Israelite, in whom there is no guile." John chapter 1, verse 47. So remember, Israel means one who struggles with God, one who struggles to attain God, to attain spiritual consciousness. So Yeshua was complimenting Nathanael greatly and said he was a true Israelite, a true spiritual seeker, one who was really struggling to attain God. And why was he a true Israelite? Because he had no guile. There was no deception in him. The two were one. In the Gospel of Thomas, Logian 7, Mar Yeshua says, "Happy is the lion whom the man eats, for the lion will become a man. But utterly destroyed is the man whom the lion eats, for the lion will become man. Let's read this again. Happy is the lion whom the man eats, for the lion will become a man. But utterly destroyed is the man whom the lion eats, for the lion will become man. The lion is associated with shaitan, or Satan, which is anger personified. So, my spiritual master used to always say, there's no problem with anger. There's no problem with the emotion, anger. It's a natural response to suffering. The problem is when the human becomes anger itself. That's what my spiritual master taught me. And that's exactly what Mar Yeshua is teaching here. Happy is the lion whom the man eats. In other words, the man was able to conquer, to devour his own anger. He was able to sublimate the lion, the anger, that vicious impulse from the Yetzer Hara. The lion will become a man. So if you conquer your anger, if you conquer that lion, if you swallow down your anger, then you remain a man, you become a human. To be human is to be humane. To not lash out in anger, but to pause and make an appropriate response that increases peace in our hearts, in others, and in the world. However, Mar Yeshua says, utterly destroyed is the man whom the lion eats, for the lion will become man. So if we let our anger take control of ourselves, or any other negative emotion for that matter, then we become the lion. We become anger. So this is very powerful teaching that is hard to understand unless you know the historical basis. Let me read something to you from Bishop Kaiser's book, a small excerpt about the basis for understanding the lion as anger, as a personification of shaitan. Kaiser writes, shaitan is often described in idiomatic Aramaic apocalyptic as a raging lion on a rampage through city streets when great evil is unleashed, such as Roman troops pillaging a Jewish town. In this metaphor, in this logion, the lion is the force of rage and anger that arises from the Yetzer Hara in one's heart. It was said of the Egyptian desert saints that, it was said of one of the Egyptian desert saints, that he never allowed anger to rise up beyond the throat. He swallowed it and sanctified himself. By the same token, if the provoked man eats the lion by refusing to empower his rising anger with evil words or deeds beyond the throat, then his lower animal nature is tamed, transformed, and sanctified into that of the perfect man, the new Adam, Bar Enash. The lion becomes man. But if he is consumed and ruled by his lower nature, such that the lion rages uncontrolled, he can eventually lose his human soul. It is one thing to recognize anger rising, but quite another to allow it to be expressed in violent words and actions. The lion becomes man, and the man is consumed. This is not advice to suppress anger, such that eventually it is not felt or recognized, yet continues to wreak psychological havoc. The inner halakah of spiritual transformation requires that anger and all other negative impulses arising from the Yetzer Hara be recognized and acknowledged. Rather, it advises that once the destructive impulses arise, They must be sublimated and transformed. That is what the metaphor of eating means. And this comes from Bishop Kaiser's book called Incarnating the New Humanity, which is a wonderful book if you want to learn deeply about Mar Yeshua's outer, inner, and secret halakah. Incarnating the New Humanity by Bishop Kaiser, Dr. Louis Kaiser. Purifying the heart. A few more verses to wrap up our talk for the day and the idea of how we purify ourselves. In Matthew chapter 15, we see, "Then he called the crowd to him and said to them, 'Listen and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles.'" So there were a lot of rules that the Pharisees approached. There were kosher food laws, and these kosher food laws are very sacred and very good to do. Jesus is not saying, do not follow the kosher rules, or do not be vegetarian or vegan if you feel that that helps to purify your heart and your consciousness. But what he is saying is that it's not so much important as the outer purifications or observances you do, such as food observations like vegetarianism or kosher laws. More than what you eat defiling you is what you say. What comes out of your mouth will defile you more than what you put into your mouth. So we should always focus on purifying our thoughts and our mind, thinking about God, praying to God. Even when we're walking down the street, you could be thinking about God. Literally, you could just think, God, God, God. God and I are one. My Father and I are one. Make it your mantra. Inhale peace, exhale love. Or any mantra from any great tradition. We should fill our mind with God so that our minds are so peaceful that positive words come out. And yes, anger will come up, but then you'll be able to stop the anger at the throat, like the Egyptian saint, right? You'll be able to swallow down the anger and transmute that anger into a positive response that is uplifting for yourself, the other person, humanity, and the world. So one of the greatest things that defiles our mind and our hearts is things said in anger, things that are said negatively, especially gossip. Gossip is one of the most pernicious sins. And if anybody gossips, we should immediately stop ourselves when we notice ourselves even lightly gossiping. Even if it's a light-hearted joke, stop. Only say things that would uplift the person, that if the person heard it themselves in person, that they'd feel uplifted and supported. You're never going to change anybody, even the worst sinner, the most vicious person. You're never going to change them by criticizing them. The only thing that helps people to evolve, if they want to evolve, is giving them love. Loving thoughts, loving words, loving actions can transform somebody that's stuck in negativity. Purifying the spiritual heart. Matthew chapter 5. It says, "So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift." On the right upper hand side, you see a Jewish priest offering incense at the altar. And on the bottom right, you see a Jewish priest offering the smoke of burnt offering, some kind of animal sacrifice. And when the fat would melt, it would create an aroma, a fragrance that would lift up to God. And it was thought that God would accept that aroma of the burnt offering, the burnt sacrifice, as an atonement for sin. But here, Mar Yeshua said that if you have a problem with your brother or your sister, then just leave your offering, don't do the worship, go and make things right. Who was our brother or sister? Our brother and sister is everybody in humanity. Mar Yeshua wasn't just speaking of your biological brother or sister, but if you have anger or a problem or a division, something that's really agitating you or that you've agitated somebody else, Jesus is saying, don't do the worship. Leave your stuff at the altar. First, go make it right, which will purify your heart and possibly the other person's heart. And then once everything is peaceful, then come back. Do your worship of God. This is the inner halakah of Mar Yeshua. Matthew chapter 16. Then Jesus told his disciples, if you want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. But what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? Many people translate the last lines here as soul. For what will it profit a man if he gain the whole world but forfeit or lose his soul? Very popular thing. The highest form of soul, the yehida, is ever pure and it cannot be defiled. But in pre-Kabbalistic thought, there was a lower part of the soul called the neshama. And this neshama is what reincarnates life after life. It is only when you make yourself perfect, tam, that you transcend the neshama and you're able to merge yahida, the feminine yahida, with yahid, Godhead. And that is union with God or enlightenment, illumination, whatever you want to call it. What is the inner halakha here? When you look at the first sentence, it's unlikely historically that Jesus said to take up your cross and follow me. Because at this point, when Jesus was teaching, he hadn't been crucified yet. My spiritual master always reminded me that the Gospels are written by disciples, not by Jesus, and that those Gospels were written to be in a divine mood, the divine mood of Jesus. It was helping us to imitate Jesus, to follow his teachings, to embody his teachings in the world. So no, Jesus did not say to pick up the cross and follow him, but it was an essential, it was what the writers of Matthew took away from Jesus' teachings that were passed down. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves. That sounds pretty deep and kind of repulsive, right, to most people. Deny myself. Why should I deny myself? Do I have to suffer? That's not what Mar Yeshua meant. To deny yourself means to not be selfish. It's totally okay to have a nice house, to have a nice car, nice clothes. But with our surplus, we should want to support those that are vulnerable, those that are in need. So it's totally okay to support yourself and make yourself comfortable. But with whatever extra we have, we should deny ourselves gluttony, and we should use that extra to feed the hungry, to clothe the poor, to help the sick and other vulnerable populations. This is very purifying of our heart when we go beyond our needs, our wants, and our desires to help to lift up somebody that's suffering. So this also merges with the outer halakha we talked about last week. And finally, purifying the spiritual heart. How do we do that? Matthew chapter 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, those who look down their nose at others, nasabiaf. For you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup, so that the outside also may become clean. There were a lot of rituals for water lustrations to clean the body before a Jewish person would enter the temple, or before a Jewish priest would do his worship of the Father, of God. So Jesus was criticizing that they focused too much on outer purity of the body, kosher food laws, and it's not that those things are bad. They're good. Jesus was an observant Jew. So he wasn't criticizing kosher food laws. He wasn't criticizing cleaning the body appropriately before worshiping. He wasn't criticizing any kind of cleanliness. What he was criticizing was people only focusing on the outer parts of religion and not focusing on cleaning up their mind and their heart. First, clean the inside of the cup, the mind, the heart, so that the outside also may become clean, so that the body and all of your actions that you do in the world will become clean. And this is Mar Yeshua's inner halakah for our spiritual rebirth into the new humanity. May it be so.